Cold open question of the day for the Wednesday, March 20th edition of the Just Basketball Show. Chris, very simple one today. We have had two brain-breaking individual buckets by NBA players, one of which was a game-winning lefty hook from like 22 feet by Kyrie Irving on Sunday to beat the Denver Nuggets. The other was Anthony Edwards quite literally injuring John Collins with a violent dunk on Monday night in a win over the Utah Jazz. The question is, which was better?
This is a cruel question. For transparency, my idea. So I set this up. I'm self-inflicting pain.
The cruelty is from you.
Yeah, 100%. This is why I'm in therapy, I guess. I'm going Kyrie. And that feels wrong to say in some ways because Anthony Edwards had a dunk that felt like the way the clip just looked, the way that it was called by the announcing team, the way the benches and all the players reacted. I mean, Kyle Anderson literally looked like someone got murdered in front of him. And the fact that someone actually got hurt, which is just like someone getting hurt on a dunk. Yuta Watanabe didn't have concussion-like symptoms from when Anthony Edwards dunked on him before. Also, just the way he watched the clip. I don't know if you saw the post-game interview he did, but just the way he reacted to it was incredible. Like 15 out of 10. No notes for you, Anthony Edwards. But I have never seen anything like what Kyrie did. Like, considering that's a game winner, an offhand 20-foot-something hook shot over a 7-footer is an absurd shot. And the reactions to that, too, have stuck with me more because he got mobbed by some teammates. But if you go back and watch the clip from any angle and you watch how Maxi Kleber reacts to it, just putting the hands behind his head, just an undershock, and the way Luka Doncic turned away, crouched on the ground, and covered his head like he was just in sheer shock. I have never seen professional athletes, Brendan, at least NBA players, react like that to moments. Like, maybe the closest I could think of is like some playoff moments that just matter more. Like that kind of, but I've never seen that kind of shot. We've seen great dunks before. That dunk is all time. I'm trying to figure out what shoe companies we can get or what sponsors we can get to pay Anthony Edwards $100 million to like do the dunk contest and save it. Like that's where we're at. But it's the Kyrie shot because I've just never seen anything quite like that before, and I don't know how you replicate that.
I'll go Ant. Primarily because he should just not be able to do that.
Yeah.
Kyrie, it's skill, right? It's out of this world. It's one of the craziest shots I've seen, period, let alone for it to happen in that moment. But physically, it makes more sense. Anthony Edwards doing a dunk that I feel like the list of people I've ever watched play basketball who could pull that off is probably just Blake Griffin. And Blake Griffin is like 6 inches taller, 5 inches taller than Anthony Edwards.
I've one other name that I would throw in there, and it's young LeBron. Young LeBron could have done this,
but he didn't.
I know, but he could, like physically, like I know what you mean. Yeah, it's true.
I don't disagree. Like there's guys, of course, like in a gym, I'm sure, but in game, to even try it and pull it off, that also takes a level of like a mindset and a confidence in your physicality, your athleticism, that is honestly pretty unique to Ant at this moment in time too. So I give the credit to him. On today's show, the wonderful Sabreena Merchant from The Athletic joins us to break down all of the players you need to be watching that will be captivating your attention in the NCAA Women's March Madness Tournament. Before that, recap of Knicks-Warriors and a little edition of What Matters More coming up next. Welcome into the Just Basketball Show, your twice-weekly dose of all things hoops. I am your host, Brendan Clean. That over there is Chris Manning. Thank you for joining us wherever you are finding us. Hit follow or subscribe, audio, YouTube, all those good places. Find us on social media, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you are. We are posting content there. A shout out to our good friends at Thrive Fantasy, a player prop DFS platform where you can pick more or less on your favorite players across multiple sports, including the NBA and NFL. Sign up today and use the code JustBasketball when you do. And Thrive will match your first deposit up to $250. That is a wonderful sign-up bonus, if I do say so myself. Check out our TikTok page, as I already mentioned, where we do just about daily prop videos, getting you ready for the night in basketball, and hopefully, success rate would indicate some winners. Chris, the Knicks beat the Warriors on Monday night, 119-112, national TV game. Jalen Brunson does his thing. The Warriors fall short late. I have a lot of observations from this one. Rare, highly competitive, mostly healthy, although the Knicks, I guess that's kind of they're just deep type of game to get, and it delivered. It taught us a lot about both teams, in my opinion. So what were your takeaways from watching this road win by the depleted Knicks?
I think it has to start with Jalen Brunson, who 34-7 for him, played utterly in control of the entire game, it felt like to me, Brendan. I mean, if you want to talk to me about who dictated the flow of that game more than anybody else on the floor, it was Jalen Brunson, and that's what he's capable of. This is, I think, a version of what he's going to do for your team. He's going to be an absolute additive guy all the time. He's incredibly trustworthy with the ball. No matter what kind of style, no matter how much he's getting bumped and hit in the rim and doesn't get certain foul calls and whatever, that guy is going to dictate the flow of a game and give the Knicks a structure, give the Knicks an identity, and it allows them to withstand everything. The flip side of that is that even though he had 27, this wasn't, how healthy Steph Curry is right now, where this team is at, I think as a result, the Warriors are at as a result, I think kind of remains an interesting question for the stretch run of the season. He was 8-20 from the field in this game, just 4-13 from 3, coming off the really good game against the Lakers, but not, the best Curry game. On the top of that, Clay wasn't good on twos. Draymond gave you absolutely nothing on offense, as he's wont to do. Not a good Wiggins game. Podziemski had moments where he just looked really unsure of not even looking at the basket at times when there's open threes available to him, if he's just a little more alert, heads up. But I look at the way you can explain this game to me is Jalen Brunson was the controller. Jalen Brunson was the guy. And Curry just didn't have it at the level Golden State's going to need him to have it if they're going to beat teams like the Knicks.
I guess I look at it a little differently. I don't feel like they could have won this game, right? And Curry was what you said. So it's kind of a, which glass half full, glass half empty type of a situation. To me, the Warriors continue to lose these games on the defensive end of the court, and I think this one was no exception. Podziemski's a great place to kind of zero in. They didn't close with him. Mm-hmm. I feel like we could be on the verge of another lineup change for this team, because it's not even about feeling small. They're just tiny. They're too tiny. And we talked about this with the Lakers game, right? You just really feel the drop-off with Wiggins not quite being the level of defender that he was during their finals run. Clay not being that. Not having an Otto Porter. Even, go a little further back, the Iguodala presence not being there. And you just cannot play small if you're not also going to guard the ball. And so late in the game, they close with Trayce Jackson-Davis. Every team seems to be picking this dude apart, but I think he's holding up pretty well in spite of that. He's at least going to protect the rim, even if in space as a rookie who is not the strongest dude in the league and, still feeling things out, is going to get exposed. And on top of him being out there to just give them more size, they also are throwing zones in and almost 5-on-4 defensive schemes to just completely ignore Josh Hart and really junking things up in a way that I feel like is going to be their ultimate destiny. So it was a parade to the basket early, but at the same time, I do feel like this game didn't feel as ugly or hopeless, I guess, as that Lakers game on Saturday, where we came off of that one and we did a show on Sunday and basically agreed, if this is how it's going to be for them, they're just going to have to put up 130, 140 to have any shot. I guess this one might give you a little bit more optimism. The opponent wasn't quite as intense because you didn't get full throttle LeBron to go up against. But I still feel like if maybe this tells us, hey, the Podziemski thing has run its course, they figured out whatever was going on with Klay, and he's back to relative normal. Chris Paul has looked a lot better since coming back. Maybe they get a little bit more stability and they're not so tiny all the time, and that would go a long way. On the Knicks side, it just felt like that pick and roll with Hartenstein was absolutely unstoppable, and that was a big, really the crux of their offense. But I wanted to shout out Miles McBride.
Oh yeah. He's a great. There's one Warriors thing I want to go back to at some point because I just have a question about that. So maybe we should do that here.
Let's close with that.
Okay.
But Miles,
the fact that I look at what they did, Brennan, at the deadline and getting rid of Quentin Grimes and just kind of understanding, I think, maybe what they had in McBride and how tough that guy is and how solid he is. And just that he's a Tibbs guy, and like him and Josh Hart, I think, are going to need just like 7 months in an ice bath before next season. Like they deserve time just recuperating with a massage gun and
47 and 48 minutes, respectively.
Josh Hart the other night
in a regulation game. Yeah.
Would it kill him just to play Bojan like 20 minutes is like really my question.
It might kill Bojan to do that, if I'm being honest. I'm not sure exactly where he's at physically, but maybe he's the one who might struggle physically through that, not Tibbs.
Yeah, but you look at what McBride's giving them, and you look at what Grimes, A, was with them for, I think, some of this year, and B, I don't know if you've looked at his, it's 6 games, so I'm not going to tell you it's like the largest sample in the world, but his numbers in Detroit, not particularly good. I don't know if
he's been hurt, but you're right. I mean, they not only
they don't miss
opened
him.
up
They don't
space
miss
for
Grimes.
McBride, they don't miss him. But they also extended McBride, which I think speaks to the optimism they probably had, like you're saying, because he's hit the ground running. And
like maybe it's just like against all odds, maybe the Knicks front office is actually good now. Like maybe they actually know what they're doing now, and for 20 years it felt like they didn't. Like maybe this is just a really well-run team now, and that's how you get guys like McBride popping. And just the way he plays you, Brennan, is I think really good as a guy off of Brunson. He's obviously not the biggest guard, right? Like, but he's tough, he's physical, and he takes a lot of threes.
The rare non-white dude who I think could be described as subtly, secretly athletic. He sneaks up on you with how fast and how high he can jump because you just watch him play, and it doesn't feel like offensively he's not going to like dunk on you. He's doesn't explode around, but there's some fast break moments or some different fighting through screen situations and stuff where it's like, whoa, he could be a linebacker out there or something too, on top of the shooting and everything.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this team is just humming. The Hartenstein pick and roll thing aside, he's just a really good, solid player. Like, that guy is a really fun development story to track over the last couple of years. Flames out in Houston, has like a very small sample in Cleveland where he was really solid. They had a bunch of centers, didn't keep him. Ends up with the Knicks. Was with the Clippers, then the Knicks. Just
and
a really,
Nuggets,
really good.
I think for a moment, yeah.
I think Denver. I think it was like. I think the order of operations is Houston, Denver, Cleveland, LA, New York. But like the development story for him and figuring out what he is, and he's just a guy that I think we're going to see in the league as like a quality center for the next several years, is just a really cool story. And like they don't miss Mitchell Robinson. Like, I think they do miss him, but like between Achua and what Achua's given them and Hartenstein, like they don't miss him as much as I could have thought.
Their identity's just different now too, where it's like, with the way that Hartenstein can kind of be a little bit more of a playmaker in the short roll or whatever, and the obvious difference that Achua is as a center versus somebody like Mitchell Robinson, it is a little bit like it's going to be an adjustment to get him back, even if we agree their ceiling is probably higher to have that good of a defender and rebounder on the court. You don't overlook that, but it's going to be different. All right, what's your Warriors question to wrap up?
Is Klay if let's just say the Podziemski thing and they decide the next game out, it's done. We're not starting him anymore.
Yeah.
Is it just like defaults back to Klay as the starter? Is there any other one you would look at?
Yeah, I think I would do Klay. I think I think Chris Paul being Chris Paul helps you take Klay off the bench. Because the other thing about the Klay benching was not just like some punishment to go send him to his room. It was also like they needed a little bit more on the bench. And I guess Jackson Davis would be another ingredient of that, the connection between him and Chris Paul. The fact that Chris is able to create his own shot more consistently lately, which he did a bunch in this game, would give me some optimism that, hey, we can let that fall off. Even if Podziemski continues to be inconsistent, as most rookies are, the bench will be fine. Klay is at least a bigger body, stronger body. He's not somebody you count on to stop at the point of attack, but there's really nobody like that outside of Gary Payton, who's not really a guy that can play heavy minutes because of his offense limitations. So I think it kind of has to be Klay.
Yeah, you could like entertain different things and talk through it, but like Chris Paul wouldn't solve the small problem, and like who else? Like you're not going to throw another big out there, and I think it would have to be Klay. I think he's earned it, frankly, just from the way he's played. It would make some sense to me if they just go back that route. It really would at this point, ultimately. Even if it's just like maybe like they hold out and it's like a playoff adjustment or something. I don't know, but it feels like Klay will be back in the starting lineup at some point before the season is over for them.
Steve Kerr seems to be good at doing the person side of this whole thing, to kind of pull the levers the way that he has. There's a lot of nits you can pick. Their season the past 2 years have not gone perfectly, but we all worried it was the end for Klay Thompson when that happened. This whole year we wondered, and then getting benched, it's like, wow, this is it. He's going to leave in the summer and all this stuff. And, here we are talking about him being kind of what they need to get back a little bit of their usual identity. All right, let's get to what matters more, which is a little game where we tell you what matters more. The Suns, Chris, number one. Blown out by both. It's a West Coast heavy, a Western Conference heavy one here. Suns getting blown out by both Boston and Milwaukee on this past week's 4-game road trip is number one. Number two, the Clippers losing back-to-back games to New Orleans and Atlanta. Not exactly killers. They're also 5-5 in their last 10, and Paul George said they don't have an identity after the loss to the Hawks. And last but not least, the Minnesota Timberwolves winning 3 straight games without Karl-Anthony Towns. And I believe 6-4 in their last 10, punctuated, as we opened the show with, by not only this dunk by Ant, but an insane block against the Pacers last week. 35-plus points feels just like the expectation lately with this guy. Really a breakout coming in the midst of surviving and treading water without their second-best player in Karl-Anthony Towns. Which of these 3 Western Conference trends matters more?
I need to pull back the curtain for 1 second, because you had something else on this list that you removed.
Okay.
I was looking.
If you want to go off script, I'm more than happy to follow you there.
What Victor Wembanyama just did against the Spurs, I think, is just like further proof of concept that guy's ready to go right now. And part of me wants to say that. It is not the answer for this season. It is very clear, because the Spurs are not good, and they're not going to be in the playoffs, and we're wondering like what draft pick they're going to get. Like that's the story for them. And like wondering and reading articles in The Athletic if they're going to try to make like a regional push in Austin and all of this stuff.
And still only beat Brooklyn by 7 in overtime, despite 33-15, 7-7.
And losing to and losing to Denver with Nikola Jokic already hitting his over of 25.5, where he was as far as a prop, and not having to play the fourth quarter. So really great stuff from the Spurs. Part of me really wants to say Victor Wembanyama. I just don't think it matters enough right now, but that game is just like, show that to someone who hasn't watched him enough this year and be like, Draymond's right. This is arguably a top 20 guy right now. I'm going to go with your Phoenix Suns, Brendan, because I think I'm running out of hope that there's anything there for them this season. You look at the Clippers, I just kind of think they're going to be fine. Like, I don't really have a lot of worry. Like, the Paul George saying that they don't have an identity just feels kind of like a late season malaise kind of quote. I trust Ty Lue. I trust Kawhi.
Feels like a thing he probably would have wanted to take back the minute he said it. Because I can tell you what the Clippers' identity is. It's like it would be more worrisome if it was like real, but I think it was like, hey, when you ask competitive people right after they fail why they failed, they're probably going to say some shit they regret. They're going to be in their feelings a little bit, and that
losing to the Atlanta Hawks is like not anyone's idea of like you feel
Yeah.
great about your team when you lose to the Atlanta Hawks right now, you know?
Exactly.
The Wolves, it's very encouraging. I think there's a case for that one as well. Them winning 3 without Cat and them holding ship and still being in the running for seeding purposes is a really big deal for them. But I think it's the Suns. I think that's the team with a ton of pressure on them this year. Maybe not more than the Clippers, but obviously a ton. They're all in terms of the apron and everything. They lose to Milwaukee without Giannis. They lose to Boston. It just feels like this is going to be, Brendan, a team that just doesn't have it this year and is never going to maximize whatever potential was there. These kind of losses, I think, tell you that story, and they're just fully running out of time to actually get things going in the right direction.
Yeah, the Suns are not a upper tier title contender. That's it. It's done. I'm not giving them a 0% chance to win it. But if they were to get anywhere near the championship this season, it would at this point qualify as a huge surprise. Nothing about their season would tell you that they belong in that conversation. They're even losing grasp of when the big three play, we're blank and blank, insert record here. They're now 16-11 with those guys, including 7-7 in their past 14 with those three on the court together. They're I think 6-6, and they're 7-7 since the All-Star break, whichever, flip those two around. Either way, mediocre for a while, even healthy. So the defense has never been good enough. The offense plays like, guys at the YMCA too often, and it just still doesn't feel like they know what their rotation is or their best defensive versus offensive lineups or a lot of those other things. So I would have to agree this is the most significant. I do just want to... The reason I wouldn't pick Minnesota is a very close second, even despite it being a very close second, Chris, is I'm now to the point where we've seen this build over the course of... Really, Ant's whole career has kind of been leading to this. It's been a steady evolution. You can include the FIBA Cup, World Cup. You can include the play-in games, the playoffs, all that. Now I just need to see it actually with Towns. Like, it's cool to happen without Towns, but can they keep this magic going with the guy that they obviously need to really hit their ceiling? That's going to be fascinating. Is there a version of this team where Ant still is scoring 35 plus a night, but they also are getting the 20 and spacing and surprisingly decent defense and depth that Towns obviously gives them? That's the question. And, posted a Dragon Ball Z meme to his IG account the other day. He's on his way. We'll see what happens there. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page that it is Phoenix. And the Wolves play the Nuggets on Tuesday night right after we record this. We also have a couple Suns games against Victor Wembanyama. So there's going to be some intersections within our little What Matters More list here. But that will do it for Chris and I talking NBA. Coming up next, Sabreena Merchant of The Athletic, women's basketball staff writer over there, is going to preview the tournament through all the players you need to watch. So, of course, we're talking Caitlin Clark. Of course, we're talking Juju Watkins. But there's more than that. We got like 10 names we're going to rip through here. First, Homage is an ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that uses vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and pop culture. Use the link below in the show description to make your purchase. A little bit of that money comes back to the Just Basketball Show. Now, here is Sabreena Merchant. Joining us now, the wonderful Sabreena Merchant, one of our most high-volume guests, I would say. I mean, it's like 3 or 4 times now. We love having Sabreena on. Expert in all things women's basketball. A tried-and-true LA sports fan. We'll ignore that for today. There's plenty to be made fun of. I think we've done that before with the Lakers and everything, so we won't, rub any of that in. But we have a lot to talk about.
Although
the
it's a
NCAA
good time to
tournament.
do that, honestly.
It is, but it always is. I mean, if we're being completely honest, like, are you a baseball fan? Can you at least just like have the throne of that sport for the season?
I mean,
are you a Dodgers fan?
The Dodgers have won the division 13 out of the last 14 years and have one World Series to show for it. So
I guess, yeah.
We're the next generation Atlanta Braves for what it's worth.
Oof.
It's very
That's Shohei,
theoretical,
though.
I guess, over there too. Yeah, We spend the most money. I guess that's the crown you can wear. All right, so we're going to go player by player with this tournament. 9 names. We'll see how many we get to. Players that are going to define this thing. Players that are going to have relevance as pros, who are going to be the next up-and-comers in college for the next few years. We got a nice spread of different teams, programs, ages, everything else. So I think we all are in agreement that the place to start is Caitlin Clark. She has gotten some attention the past few years. People may have heard of her. Number 1 seed Iowa in Albany. We don't know their opponent yet. Their bracket is, well, let me just start there. Sabreena, how do you feel about this bracket? We obviously have a potential LSU rematch looming, but besides that, what do you think of the pathway here for Iowa to get back to the Final Four and maybe check that final box in this insane college career that Caitlin has been able to put together?
Yeah, just my immediate reaction from the selection show when we saw the reveal of Albany 2 was, oh my goodness, region of death, which I typed in all caps in our Slack, and I think I had to write not for the live blog because I wasn't sure if things were going in. But just one team after another, it was just, oh, Kansas State's in Iowa's region. That's tough. They've already played them twice this year and split those. Oh, Colorado's in Iowa's region. That's a team that's already beaten LSU this year. Oh, LSU's there. Like, we could get a rematch of the national title game. Oh, UCLA is there. Like, maybe the most talented roster in college basketball outside of Columbia, South Carolina. And I'm sure I'm forgetting other names like Creighton, is the 7 seed. They beat Iowa in the tournament 2 years ago. Familiar Iowa foe Drake is in that bracket. I mean, just a lot of potential for rematches, which I think are always hard in the NCAA tournament. And then just really, really high-level teams. I mean, there were 12 teams that were ranked in the top 3 of the AP poll at one point this season, and 5 of them are in that region. So it's some star power, and no one more exemplifies that than Caitlin Clark, because it's interesting to think at this time last year, I was covering her Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games in Seattle, and there were actually like significant numbers of empty seats in that arena. And fast forward a week later, they're dethroning South Carolina, playing LSU in front of 10 million people on national television. And now, we're talking about whether the women's final is going to outdraw the men's final. And can you get tickets to an Iowa game? Like, the hotels in Albany are already just completely sold out. It's a ridiculous endeavor trying to just get there at this point. I think we're about a year anniversary from when Caitlin Clark became the national phenomenon that is Caitlin Clark. And it's weird to think that, at this point, you could still just walk up and talk to her, and it wasn't a huge big deal. And now she is the most recognizable college athlete, I believe, in America, and deserving of all those honors. A leading scorer in college basketball history, 4th all-time in assists, has led the country in points and assists twice over the same season. The game winners, logo threes, she's got everything. And it stands to reason that we talk about her all this much, because she's awesome and she's going to be the National Player of the Year, and she's going to have to be excellent for Iowa to get out of this region.
The other thing I would even just, the hype of her is also it's just going to keep extending. I mean, the Final Four is happening in Cleveland. The ticket prices for Final Four games for the women are right now, if you look at the data that's been put out there, is higher than the men's right now because of it. And I'm sorry, that's at least somewhat because of her, because of speculation that she could get there.
And that's why, Chris, you're not being blessed with my presence in Cleveland, with all love.
Yeah, you're
once
actually
it became clear I was not getting credentialed for that event because I didn't have anywhere to do that for, I was like, no, we're good.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to when
effect equals me not visiting you.
Yeah, it's fine. You're gonna come in the fall at some point. You're gonna be like, I just really wanted to see Darius Garland and Isaac Okoro play basketball. But I get it, my brother. I understand. But even going forward, this is anecdotal. But I have an uncle who lives in New York. He's an Iowa fan. He's in an Iowa boosters group. He's already been told that a Caitlin Clark Liberty game is sold out in the city, and they're talking about buying tickets in an $80 package secondhand, and that they have to buy them now or otherwise they're going to go up. And I'm like, this is only going to keep building. I think to your point, Sabreena, she's going to have to just be incredible, and I think we kind of saw that in the Big Ten Championship. That game really didn't tilt in their favor. She wasn't the one who put the final nails in the coffin, so to speak, but it was because of how good she was in the second half after a poor first half. That is why they even won the Big Ten tournament in the first place. She's going to have if not full games, like a lot of halves, I think, for them to pull this off and for her to get the one thing that she doesn't have in her resume right now.
Yeah, and it's weird to think that, we think of the Big Ten championship as a bad game for her at halftime because, you look at the box score and what does Caitlin finish with? 34 points, 12 assists, 3 steals,
casual,
7 rebounds,
Normal.
She has the game-winning step back with under a minute left in overtime. She got the Tim Legler, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the video board treatment on ESPN afterwards. Yeah, she's just the coolest.
Speaking of that, it was kind of funny that they were like, he's been dying to talk about her all season, and now we let him. I'm like, what was in the way before? I don't like. I know he doesn't go on College Game Day. He's not quite the the cast member for that show. But Tim, open invitation to come on. We'll let you use your iPad and hold it up to your webcam, whatever is needed.
We can telestrate
anytime.
on StreamYard, right? Like that's the word.
Yeah. They're designing it. They're adding
word.
the capability as we speak. All right. We'll have plenty. We have talked plenty. We will talk plenty about Caitlin Clark. I think that's a good place to leave it. I think they're second or third in the odds to come away with this whole thing. The action is going to be on them, I would say, from a better standpoint. So maybe those will be skewed, but they ought to be somebody we're talking about 2 weeks from now, still being a major factor. Juju Watkins is up next, though, for us. Number 1 seed in. I wish, could we just come up with the regions should come together, the head coaches or the star players or some sort of captain, like a team building activity, just come up with a name for their group, Megatron or just whatever they want to be.
Sure, yeah, that's the name, Brendan.
Team
Megatron. Yeah, that's the one.
We could call Albany Megatron. I think that's
the
fine.
Lions. Yeah, I don't
just
know.
name them after.
Okay.
Are we just naming them after different Transformers? What are we doing
Well,
here?
it's up to them.
The Optimus,
I'm just saying maybe that's what I would pick, but
okay.
I don't know what Juju and Co would go for.
There was some discussion in Seattle last year of a Pike Place versus a Space Needle regional. Because that's how they did it in the bubble in 2021 when they were in San Antonio.
I remember that. Yeah, right. They did the Riverwalk.
Alamo Dome.
Yes.
Yeah, all those. Which I don't know if that's sillier than Portland 3 and Portland 4 or equally silly, but I will agree I don't like saying Portland 3 and Portland 4.
So they have in their bracket UConn, Ohio State, but I would say with Juju in a different way than Caitlin, because obviously she's a freshman, we don't have the track record. We don't have a will they win a championship or not as the only question that we're asking. I'm more interested in what Juju Watkins does in this tournament. And I think some of that is impacted by the fact that 2 of the times in recent memory that I've been able to sit down and watch her games from start to finish were pretty ugly. The Pac-12 championship game against Stanford, as well as the last time they played Oregon State, were 2 of her worst games. But, I mean, she scored 51 against Stanford. I think that's what really put her on the map. Chris and I talked, Sabreena, about the wonderful feature on her in that program that was at The Athletic earlier in the season about you really just need that one recruit. And I think kind of the future of that program has really been accelerated because of what she's been able to do. But just as a player in this tournament, what are you looking at that will kind of define how far they can go or the heights she can rise to in her first go around with this whole thing?
Yeah, I think what's so cool about Juju is that even as a freshman, she is so capable of playing at her own pace. I think we saw it from the very beginning when they played at Ohio State on opening day, preview a potential Elite Eight game. But Ohio State has this very disruptive press and they speed opponents up and they just, completely throw off the rhythm of a game. And Juju had just zero difficulty with it, right? She was able to see over the top of it, still conduct herself completely balanced in the half court, gets to the line a ton. I think she averaged 2.5 more free throws per game than any other player in the Pac-12 this season, which is wild to think about because there's so many great bigs in the Pac-12. So I'm just interested to see if she continues to establish her own tempo, establish her own pace within these games because, we saw it in the Pac-12 championship game against Stanford. Like you mentioned, it was an ugly game for Juju, but that's because Stanford entirely sold out on her. And why wouldn't you when you are going up against a player who scored 51 points against you the last time out, right? So it was like 5 sets of eyes on Juju at all times, and that required everybody else to step up, right, and essentially play 4-on-4 in the half court, and sometimes like even at a man advantage because there was so much attention on Juju. So I'm curious if like the game plan stays that way, if everybody still tries to lock in on Juju, or if they play it, more balanced like we saw for most of the regular season, where Juju still had an opportunity to get up like 26, 27 shots on any given day. I'm curious if her ability to get to the line still holds up, because when she gets to the line, that's when you're in trouble, right? Because she's so good at finishing through contact. She puts your defenders in foul trouble, and she's an awesome foul shooter too. So those are the main things I have an eye on, because this is a team that like individually, like they all have a lot of experience, that they're all separate stops, other than Juju, who's obviously a freshman but has been in the limelight for such a long time. She's signed with Clutch. She went to the fanciest private school in Los Angeles and was friends with Bronny James. So like the stage isn't necessarily new to any of them, but like they haven't done this together. So I do think that it's going to rely on Juju being exceptional to, show out and live up to that 1 seed line.
Well, and if we're thinking about, I think, who could take the baton from who's going to be the most popular player in the country in women's college basketball next year, if she makes an Elite 8 run and is great during it, it very easily could be her. I feel like she has not benefited, I think, from how hard it can be at times to watch Pac-12 games, and also the
100%.
fact that it's not easy, and that has really hurt her. Whereas, like, say what you want about Peacock, like Caitlin Clark is like has been in recent months like a featured face on Peacock. When you open up the app, it's like we have Caitlin Clark and also WWE and Premier League Soccer and the holdovers. Like we've got it all for you here at Peacock. No free ads, I guess. But
fortunately, Juju is joining Caitlin's conference next year, so that problem will be alleviated.
This is.
But you're right.
It like that's going to be a big deal to get her in front of like a larger audience. And if she goes on a run, they have a really good coach that's an up-and-coming program. She's a star. She would be the one that I think you could look at and say, this is the person we're going to be fawning over next year. There's obviously other candidates. Some will talk about that, some we won't. But that's, to me, staring as the obvious one to pick up that baton and be like the face of women's college basketball while Caitlin goes to the WNBA.
Yeah. And I would say that it's also going to be fascinating. Caitlin Clark has gotten so much attention as being revolutionary, changing what we think of as what that face of this sport and whatnot can be and how they can play and all those types of things. Juju is a throwback. Like, we know what that is. She's like an amazing, way ahead of her years version of that, and there's things that are going to make her unique that already do make her unique that we can continue to watch. But it's funny that the relationship between Maya Moore and Caitlin Clark has been documented lately, and Maya Moore came out of hiding to come make an appearance, which was very awesome. Obviously joking about it being hiding. But like Juju is much closer to that than Caitlin Clark is. So there is something very throwback and fun about just seeing a bona fide like wing bucket getter that is comfortable or like recognizable. But I guess as far as what we're watching, I mean, you mentioned the foul trouble. Like, there's only so many people on these rosters that can guard her. So that's what's always fun when the foul trouble comes. It's like now she's just getting to pick at somebody smaller than her, somebody slower than her, and it's like, is there even 2 people on any given roster who even have a chance to slow her down? And if she gets one of them in foul trouble, it's kind of over. They also have been Sabreena, a little bit definitely vulnerable on the road versus at home. I think they only have 1 home loss this season, USC. The tournament, of course, provides some hostile environments from time to time. So how she in particular handles that, I mean, she had a 7 of 24 game. Okay, road against UCLA, not quite the same thing as a typical road game, but Colorado, 8 of 22. There's been some moments where she's been a little bit dicey in those spots. So she's a rookie, right? Or she's a freshman, right? So I think that's natural. Any last thoughts on Juju?
No, just to hit on that exposing Juju to a national audience point for a second. Like, USC had 4 games on national television all season that were not on the Pac-12 network. 2 of them were on True TV, which is quasi-national, and ESPN Plus, which I'm including as national TV, even though it's a streaming service, because it is still more widely accessible than the Pac-12 network. So For as much as people have heard about Juju Watkins, and I'm sure they have, I really do think that not a lot of people have ever watched her play. And so just to get her on ESPN on Saturday, during big tournament showcase, even if it is a 1 versus 16, I'm just excited for what's going to happen when it's like, oh, like, wait, that's Juju Watkins? Like, she can do that? I think we're just going to have like a really fun highlight day, one of her early round games.
I do just want to note very quickly, you say True TV. I just want to note some of the things that have aired, that air on True TV, in addition to Juju getting to play some games there. And Practical Jokers.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty much it, right? Is that the end of the list?
That's the list.
You got, like, in some of the episodes, Anthony Davis will apparently be on one of these episodes. Post Malone, John Mayer. Actually, as I'm scrolling through this, it's the only two things I'm seeing besides NCAA Tournament women's basketball and college basketball are Impractical Jokers and True TV Presents, World's Dumbest. That's all I'm seeing. So that's like,
they're simulcasting NBA on TNT stuff too lately. They're trying to make that a sports channel, which is part of why they threw some Pac-12 on there, but not exactly.
There's no alignment. There's not American. Some American Dad at like 3 a.m. if that's your jam. So really great stuff from the NCAA and women's basketball there. Really cool.
But you're absolutely right, Sabreena, because it's going to be the first opportunity I think a lot of people have. It's also this cool thing, though, where partially because of the LeBron connection, partially because of the Southern California, LA of it all, real ones know already, right? Like, there is going to be that kind of support for her if she has a big game where NBA guys, WNBA players, it's going to be buzzing on social media in a way already. And so, I mean, like you're kind of saying, if she actually follows up some of this hype with some awesome performances, like, this is really a star-making opportunity, I think, even bigger than she already is. Let's get to Paige Bueckers, a name that I think many people have watched and who will be around for one more year at the college level. Beyond this, another season for UConn, kind of defined by injuries, I think you would have to say. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, a 3 seed, 29-5 season. And Paige has strung together some solid performances to round out the season. So what are your expectations for this strange in-between injury-riddled era for the Huskies and what Paige can do healthy, it seems, in another tournament?
Yeah. I think about the current era of college basketball that we're in sort of as the post-UConn era, because from 2013 to 16, when Brianna Stewart was leading UConn to 4 straight titles, MOP every year, just no sense of doubt at all when UConn got into the tournament. I know we all love to root against a Goliath, but I'm not sure that was a great time for women's college basketball just because of this total certainty that UConn operated with. And we've had 6 different champions in the 7 tournaments since, and I think that's just been so much better in terms of parity and bringing new fans in because there's actually some curiosity over what's going to happen. And unfortunately, UConn is just the victim of that, right? Because everybody was rooting against them for so long, and now they just sort of get to revel in their misery. And it's much harder to do that when Paige Bueckers misses a whole season with a torn ACL, and then AZ Fudd misses most of his season with a torn ACL. And these 2 players came into UConn as best friends, wanting to play together and bring titles back to Storrs, and they've played maybe 11 games together over the last 2.5 years, which is just unfortunate. But I look at UConn, and they're an absolute buzzsaw against every team that is worse than them. They do not get upset. If you put them in a situation where they're expected to win, not only do they win, they cream their opponents. They played a game against Marquette, where I think Marquette finished with 29 points and didn't score in the last 15 minutes near the end of the season. I'm going to repeat that. They didn't score for the last 15 minutes against UConn, and this is when you have your scrubs in the game. So, if you're trying to pick UConn as an early upset, that is a terrible idea. Do not do that. But then you look at the fact that when they're matched up against teams who are considered to be as talented or potentially more talented than them, they lost to South Carolina by double digits. They lost to Notre Dame at home by double digits. They lost to UCLA. They lost to Texas. When they've had an opportunity to provide a resume-building win to be hey, we're still UConn even though we play in the Big East, have not been able to come up with that. So I'm torn between Paige Bueckers is a stone-cold killer who got her team to the national title game basically single-handedly in 2022, the last time we saw her in NCAA tournament. And then also hey, UConn, try winning a game against a good team. Can we do that? And I still have a lot of respect for Gino and Paige, but it's just hard for me to see this UConn team figuring it out at this point of the year when, oh yeah, their backup center has also been ruled out for the NCAA tournament. So they have a 6-player rotation. That's it. And I know rotations run smaller in the NCAA when games are only 40 minutes long, but to me, 6 is just not enough.
Yeah, it's a bummer. Can you explain one thing about her, which I feel you maybe won't be able to, but I'm going to ask you anyway? How is she averaging 2 blocks a game?
Oh, yeah. So Paige, that you might be familiar with as the National Player of the Year as a freshman, which, yeah, National Player of the Year as a freshman, was a point guard for that UConn team and ran the offense. Yeah. And now, because of all of the injuries to the front court, Paige plays power forward for UConn. And so you put her in the paint, playing some help side defense. That's where the 2 blocks come from. And I think it's a testament to how cool Paige is that she can just shift on the court like that. You mentioned she has another year to play at UConn at least. She actually has a medical redshirt year, so she could go another 2 years at UConn. But I'm excited to see what she looks like as a pro because she was like Caitlin before Caitlin in terms of the scoring and the playmaking. And Caitlin obviously added another element with the deep shooting that Paige doesn't really have in her bag. But, Paige and Caitlin played each other in the NCAA tournament in 2021 as freshmen. And UConn crushed them in that game. And Becker's was way better. And it's weird to think that that was ever a thing because look at Caitlin now and everything that she's accomplished. And maybe it's just health, but I still think Paige is such a good player that we kind of forget about, which is weird because whoever forgets about UConn,
Well, the thing is too, I feel like it feels unfair to just compare them to each other, but just to play that out. They have faced each other in that high profile game and whatever. I'm just going to do it. I think the other aspect that makes them similar that felt like this rivalry or this sort of head-to-head thing could be building is Paige is just as much of, and I say this lovingly, just as much of an MFer as Caitlin Clark is, right? I interview when Paige won Gatorade Player of the Year during the pandemic, before she, as she was going to UConn, I interviewed Sue Bird about her. And she was like, this is kind of just like Diana again, in terms of the mentality and the FU kind of effort and physicality to her game and everything else. And I've said this to Chris before. The stop-start nature of it makes it hard to fully evaluate where Paige is, but this season's been very good about kind of anything you would look at. Half court, running an offense, the versatility you kind of need and everything else. If you made the case to me that she was more suited in that and had some advantages in that put her a little bit above Caitlin in that one specific category, I wouldn't argue much against that. I think she is a really, really gifted player, can kind of post up, can run a more unpredictable pick and roll that doesn't always just kind of, layup versus pull up 3. There is a lot to her game that I hope, whether it's a surprise run with 6 players this year or it is maybe more likely an even better, even more dominant season next year that we really get to see. And then obviously when she makes her way to the W after that. Chris, you're a big Paige fan. We thought she was coming to the W. We were hyping ourselves up for it. I kind of poured water on that for you and ended up being right. But what are you looking at here with her?
I am on the Paige. If anyone ever sold Paige stock, I bought it below market value. The injury stuff is just a bummer, and it's unfortunate, but it shaped her to where she is. But I feel like this year might end up being a build for next year. Obviously, UConn's going to lose Aaliyah Edwards, based on what Gino, I think, said this week, which makes sense. She's been there 4 years, all that stuff. But this feels like a build to next year for her, and then next year it's okay, is she fully realized herself and what we kind of know she's capable of next year? And this year it's can she get to the Sweet 16 with the 6-man rotation and drag her team there? And that's hard. And in 2, I think some people I wonder will look at her and say oh, she's not winning UConn. I think that Caitlin Clark's an example of this. I think South Carolina's an example of this. Even if she is like Sue Bird said, Brendan, the Taurasi kind of for the modern age in terms of her competitiveness in that way, the landscape for her to win is now just harder than ever. And I want to see her attack that. I'm kind of actually glad in some way she's coming back another year just because we get to see what that looks like. It'll be really cool to see her as a pro because I think she's going to be a really good pro. And maybe I'm curious to see if she'll never say this publicly, I wonder what she thought of where she could have ended up is the other part of this. Like what she looked at those organizations and thought, okay, are those actually good fits for me? But another year for her where she gets to get healthy, hopefully, and be healthy a full year and get better and maybe build on this year feels like a really good win-win situation for her. Even if this year I see them like winning early and then probably fading out once we get deeper in.
All right. Next up, Malaysia Fulwiley. A player who, comes off the bench, can get crowded out on a very, dynastic South Carolina roster. Just years and years of recruiting at a really high level, and Pow comes over now, and maybe she gets overlooked. But I picked her intentionally over Cardoso or Raven Johnson, anyone else we might have been able to kind of look at as, looking a little bit ahead, looking a little bit back. Where does this player fit into all of this? Fulwiley is a freshman, so she is kind of at the, that same breakout type of exciting moment, the way that we talked about Juju being. But she is also a highlight reel in human form. Like, this is one of the smoothest, heat checkiest, just most straight up exciting players to watch in college basketball, I think, Sabreena. And you would watch that SEC championship game where she goes for 24, which I believe was a season high, and it would not be hard to convince yourself that we're on the precipice of, like, she could do even more than what she did in the regular season in March and April.
You hit it on the head where she's just a highlight reel in human form, whereas a lot of people have not had an opportunity to watch Juju Watkins. I don't know any people who haven't seen the highlight of Malaysia Fulwiley from opening day against Notre Dame, where she had just the, hezzy in transition and then the behind the back and like scoop around her, to the left. I can't even like describe adequately what she did against Notre Dame on that transition possession, but you had Magic Johnson tweeting about it. You had like Kevin Durant tweeting about it. You had just like the biggest people in basketball recognizing her talent in her very first game in college. And to think she comes off the bench, right? She does play less than Tina Pow and Raven Johnson and Bree Hall, and sometimes even less than Tessa Johnson. Like, there's just so many other talented guards on South Carolina that you could forget about Fulwiley. And yet there she is, championship game, wins the SEC tournament most outstanding player. There's just something different about her, right? Like, she's just objectively more cool than other players in college basketball. And, she's had like a tremendous week from an NIL perspective. I think she just got signed by Under Armour and Red Bull and some other giant company. But it's just been a really like eye-opening week for me in terms of like, this is just a girl from South Carolina who probably would have gone to USC even if it hadn't been a powerhouse, because like she's a homebody and like wanted to stay local, and lo and behold, she just happens to be one of the very best players in the country.
It's crazy.
And
the South Carolina thing, not to get us on a tangent, but somebody needs to, maybe I'm speaking to a person who has the means more than me, Sabreena, to pull off a story like this, but assuming Zion and Ja are back on more stable footing, there is a South Carolina what the hell is going on here story to be written about, like, between Asia, the two of them, Fulwiley now, just obviously the Dawn Staley of it all, like, this tiny little state, and by no means anybody's powerhouse, has generated this talent, and she just feels like a continuation of a trend that I'm not sure how it keeps going on, but here we are.
Yeah, and again, not to continue that tangent, but I think the best player in high school right now, Joyce Edwards, she's from South Carolina. She's going to South Carolina next year too. She was, I think, the USA U19 team's leading scorer when they won the gold medal this last summer, and she did that like after her junior year in high school when they were college freshmen on that team. So just something more to get excited about if you're a Gamecocks fan or interested in the South Carolina basketball renaissance. But yeah, I just think Fulwiley is just magnetic, right? Like, she just draws eyes and draws like attention. And for as good as South Carolina has been recently, they haven't had somebody who's just like, who just draws you in like she does. So I think it's just another element to what, like you mentioned, has already been a dynastic era for South Carolina.
Chris, thin as a twig and is shooting 51% from 2. And she scores like a point a minute.
I mean,
like this is. I feel like she's gonna maybe be the name that sneaks up on people more than anybody in this tournament.
Well, I mean, you know what? I'm not gonna sit here and like try to make like an unfair comparison. So I'm trying like not to do that. But she wears the same number as someone that she has the same kind of energy as with the. When I googled the Notre Dame clip, they just refer to it's just razzle dazzle. Like the only thing you can find that as on YouTube is the razzle dazzle play. She plays with that kind of energy and intensity, and there's a certain other number 12 that you named, Brendan. Like that's there. That's
not
is
that
there.
unfair. I mean, you're kind of getting them at a nadir here, so you can throw the comp out. I don't think it's she could surpass that. I think she might hope so, right?
Yeah, I mean, I get scared making player comps because I think they often put burdens on players that are not really fair, even if you don't mean them to be. You know what I mean?
Well, and you're doing a cross-gender.
Yeah, like
comp,
there's
people have mixed feelings about, so you got you got to tread lightly there.
But if you told me like the highlight of the tournament that wasn't a Caitlin Clark or Juju Watkins play was from her, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. I would take that bet. I would absolutely take that.
Is there a women's player that she reminds you of, Sabreena?
No.
I have a hard time like placing it. It's just electricity. Like it's crazy to watch her.
Yeah, like you said, it's just electricity, which is what makes her so much fun.
Yeah.
And like,
all right,
there's just so much more to go. Like
Keep
with her,
going.
just real quick, because like you said, comes off the bench. She wasn't even the SEC like 6th player of the year. That went to Ashlyn Watkins, who was on her team. She wasn't the SEC freshman of the year. That went to Michaela Williams, another superstar freshman from LSU. So like she's barely scratching the surface in terms of what she's being like allowed to do at South Carolina, and it's never ending there. There's just talent upon talent that keeps coming off that bench.
And already shooting 32% from 3, which sometimes for guards, and she's not short is the thing. I want to say smaller player, but she's 5'10", listed as at 5'10", so I guess that helps her out. But to have the floor she already has with not a huge weakness outside of just being a little slight, it feels like the sky's the limit. I guess turnovers, are a little high. She'll probably settle into more of a traditional kind of point guard
creativity
approach,
tax.
maybe as time goes on. Exactly. And hey, you're playing 15 minutes, so how damaging is it really going to be if you toss it around a little bit versus the upside of what you can do? Exactly. So, all right, on to the Stanford Cardinal and Cameron Brink, expected to be probably the 2nd overall pick in the draft, certainly top 3.
That's what I was gonna, Brendan. I think that's where I just want to ask Sabreena. She's going to be the number 2 pick, right? Like, unless something she does just really bad in this tournament, this just feels like she maybe just solidifies it with how she plays over the next couple of weeks. Like that just feels like where this is going.
If I were the GM of the Los Angeles Sparks, she would absolutely be the number 2 pick. I have heard a lot of Rukia Jackson-Love recently, and she had an outstanding SEC tournament. She nearly leads Tennessee to the upset over South Carolina. She's just gets buckets. Like there's no real way around that. I mean, Tennessee played Team USA during a November scrimmage, and she was the leading scorer in that game. So like to be able to get to her spot against actual WNBA stars, you look at her and you see like, okay, that's what she's going to do at the WNBA level. So I've heard a lot of Rukia Jackson-Love. That being said, like one dominant skill versus everything Cameron Brink does, I think it's a pretty clear tally towards Brink. But let's just say like I wouldn't be stunned if Cameron Brink wasn't the 2nd pick.
It's weird because unless I'm looking at something incorrect here, and I don't think I am, it's the Sparks have the 2nd and the 4th pick. So Correct. If they kind of work themselves into a shoot a little bit and go, okay, we'll take Rukia Jackson at 2, and then Cardoso is going to be there at 4, we kind of get 2 needs, even though like I think most people would say is the best player of that group. You just take them at 2, and
exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think of the fit between Brink and Cardoso? Because ESPN had that at 2 and 4, and I was like, okay. I mean, to the point of best available, sure, but that feels like unnecessary crowding, even if you're resetting and just trying to take talent.
I think Cam's been at her most successful playing next to another big. She's really good at operating out of the high post. She's good at the high-low passes with Kiki Iriafen. She's stretched her range a little bit. I mean, I know she's only shooting like 29% on threes, but the motion looks good, and she's an 85% free throw shooter. So I do believe that she'll be able to be a jump shooter at some point in her WNBA career. And like Cardoso has played next to a big her entire time at South Carolina too. Like she played next to Aaliyah Boston. She played next to Victoria Saxton. I know that like there's a want to go like more modern with like a stretch four next to a big, but like I still think the WNBA is a league that prioritizes front court players, and you can get away with playing too big so long as they're very skilled. And I think Cam is skilled enough to play the four. So I don't think that's like the determining factor. Like you can't play Brink next to Cardoso. So I think that could work out just fine. And like you said, Chris, like sometimes you just don't want to overthink it. Like Cam is a better player than Rickea Jackson. So just take Cameron Brink at 2, right?
Yeah.
All right. So what do you think of Stanford's situation within all of this, Sabreena? They are a 2 seed. They have Maryland in their way, NC State, who was had a solid close to the season, Rickea Jackson in Tennessee, who we just mentioned, and Texas is their 1 seed. Stanford's one of those teams where feels like, I mean, throughout Cameron Brink's entire time there and way beyond that, just feels like we're going to be talking about them at the end of March in some way, shape, or form, no matter what the kind of pathway is. But what do you think of this year's squad? Because it does look substantially different, with Brink being probably one of the only names that people might really recognize, with a little bit of a transition era happening right now.
Agreed. It is a very different team. No Haley Jones, no Hull twins that were there for so long. Their guards are kind of anonymous. Like, I'm not sure the average college basketball fan could even like pick Elena Bozgana out of a lineup, or like, what does Brooke Dimitri look like? I mean, they're perfectly capable players, but they're not ones who are striking fear into the hearts of opponents. Cam is just going to have to be really good for Stanford. This is a Cardinal team that really, really relies on the production of its front court between Brink and Iriafen. And like, for all of the historical success of Stanford, and they won a national title 3 years ago, just based on the fact that they didn't win the Pac-12 tournament last year. They got upset on their home court in the NCAA tournament. They once again laid an egg against USC in that Pac-12 final. I think there is some impetus to be like, okay, like we are the standard of the Pac-12, right? Like we are the standard bearers for West Coast basketball, and here's USC taking away some of our shine, and here's UCLA taking away some of our shine. And I think it's kind of like, once the Pac-12 ends, this is our time to reclaim some of that Stanford-ness. And I think they're pretty upset about being a 2 seed, actually, behind Texas. Like, I think if you look at the overall resumes, I probably have favored Stanford over Texas. The fact that they're in Portland probably makes it negligible, because it'll be a more pro-Texas crowd. More pro-Stanford crowd if we get to that point in the Elite Eight. But I think they kind of have something to prove, which is weird to say about a team that won the Pac-12 regular season and had the Pac-12 Player of the Year in Cameron Brink. She got a little beat up, by Rhea Marshall and by Reagan Beers in some of those Pac-12 games. And this is kind of a chance to be like, hey, we're still Stanford, right? Like, you shouldn't be putting us on a 2 line, right? We're the best team here, and we should be, advancing to the Final Four again.
I'm excited for Stanford to join the ACC. That just really a match made in heaven for
the ACC is now called a Coastal Conference. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Oh
exactly.
my God! Can I?
I had to refresh my memory of where they were going, and I just saw that as you were talking and couldn't help but bring it up. But
this is gonna hurt my brain. This is just gonna hurt our brains next year, right? Like all of this.
Yeah.
It is.
How long?
It already is, clearly, as I just said.
But before
place it at all.
Before or after December 1st, when like some coach, like pick a coach from the former Pac-12, Dawn State, like whomever, is just like, I'm really sick of the travel. Like they just complain about having to fly cross country. Like how long until we get that? I'm saying before December 1st.
Complain is one thing. I'm waiting for a revolt among fans when a coach uses that as an excuse for a loss that their athletic department chose to create the situation for.
Someone already has that Reddit post ready to go. Like that's already in the hopper. That's saved as a draft already.
Yeah. All right. So I will just say I thought with Brink, even in that, like, just to kind of highlight her individual talent, like that USC game did not go their way. To have kind of the game plan work against Juju, but still let almost every other offensive weapon on that team do what they wanted. Disappointing for sure, but Brink individually was still awesome. 6 blocks, felt like the 4-on-4 kind of dynamic that you were talking about earlier, Sabreena, just allowed her to really roam and make individual plays and take up space the way that she can, and was if she was, I guess, not wanting to be drafted into the WNBA, but maybe like wanting to win an Oscar, that would be the clip you would send in. I don't think that's how it works in drafts. I think they can watch all the games, but I'll just use that metaphor. But let's get to our next one, Anissa Morrow. I picked her out of a crop at LSU that I think you could go anywhere with, Sabreena, but I picked her specifically because she's probably the least well-known, and I think I saw a very early 2025 WNBA mock draft that somebody did with her very prominently featured, we'll say, and you look at the three-point shooting, and that's the obvious kind of thing to raise your eyebrow at, but this moment where we are now, before we fast forward all the way there, is exactly why she signed up to transfer and come play with this team. She can still do the bucket getting that she was kind of forced into at DePaul, but has really, to me, pretty seamlessly fit into a super team, we could call it, at LSU, and they're well on their way to having something to say about the title this season as well. So what should people be looking at with her specifically, her fit here, her role, and just what this team can do?
So she comes in, like you said, as a bucket getter from DePaul. She averaged, 26 points at DePaul last year. Pretty big number. And then makes the jump to the SEC, which, easily a top 2 conference, let's say, in the country, and essentially keeps the same efficiency. She's still just a dynamite rebounder. It's so hard to get rebounds against LSU with the combination of Anissa Morrow and Angel Reese in the front court. And if that 3 ball is working, it is so hard to guard her because she's just a blow by burst by you. She's really strong inside, just is always looking to score too, super aggressive mentality. So I've really liked the fit with her on LSU. I was a little concerned about how it would look without a traditional center because I also think of Angel Reese more as a power forward. Mm-hmm. But defensively, it's been awesome. They've worked out just fine. And they're obviously scoring at a really high rate too. They still can't quite solve the South Carolina puzzle, but nobody really can. So I'm not going to, mark that as a ding against them. It is what it is. It's been just cool to watch a player who I guess technically was still in a power conference, depending on how we classify the Big East. I don't really think of him that way, but just going to an entirely new level of competition and talent and just being as effective as ever, and playing with really high expectations too, because these are the defending champions and they brought you in to maintain that standard. And I think you have to unequivocally say that she has. So it's cool to watch just, SEC opponents still not be able to figure out Anissa Morrow, just like Big East opponents were not able to, and her just be a really fun, aggressive scorer and just talks a lot of crap too. She fits right in with everything else she is doing.
When I was watching
LSU does that?
Yeah, just a little.
Interesting.
Certainly their head coach also has never said anything uncomfortable to anyone.
Nothing
Brendan,
controversial whatsoever.
No one on that team. There wasn't any issues between the head coach and injuries. Nothing. I don't know what you're talking about. But even during the tournament, I think what would kind of exemplified some of what you guys are getting at with the toughness and her fitting in is that Auburn game that they absolutely shellacked Auburn in, but she got a black eye. And just was like, I'm fine, it doesn't matter. And her teammates were like, are you breaking out in hives? All the quotes post that game were wild because they didn't really know. No one really seemed to understand what happened. And she just didn't care that she had a black eye. I can tell you that if I'm looking at a picture of that eye right now because I Googled it to remind myself what it looked like. It looked like she was boxing and got punched in the face. And she just was like, yeah, whatever, it's cool, it doesn't matter. She just fits into that culture in a really, really impressive way. That's not easy. It's interesting to me that they kind of, in her and Haley Van Lith, I think they kind of got the 2 transfers that would seemingly just kind of fit in there. Because not everyone would go there and feel comfortable, I think, in that environment. I think they kind of, however they did it, whether it was particular scouting, whether it was just luck combination of the two. Like they kind of got the two players that fit in with that culture, even if they haven't been maybe quite as high as last year, but that they're still really dangerous, I think, in part especially because of Morrow, but also just because I think they kind of nailed finding players who fit what they want to be about.
Yeah, and I think of those two transfers, you'd have to say that Anisas has gone more successfully than Haley Van Lith, but
yeah,
I'm not here to just throw shade at Haley Van Lith. I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunities to do so later.
Yeah, as far as LSU goes, they've also lost Poa and Poole over the course of the season in terms of veteran contributors. Not that Poole was some sort of massive difference maker, but just to indicate kind of where they're at. She was a presence last year and was playing bench minutes for them before leaving early in the season. So they're a little bit, they're just more reliant on those two transfers, Reese and some young players than maybe including Michaela Williams, and they might have expected to be. So we'll see. But we talked about Rickea Jackson a bit. I think Tennessee feels like maybe trending upward, and I'm sure we'll break down what comes for them. So I will let you close us out, Sabreena, by picking between UCLA's Charisma Osborne and Ohio State's J.C. Sheldon. Which of those do you want to close with? Who excites you more? Who has more at stake or on the table heading into the tournament?
I think I'm just going to combo it because there's a lot of similarities going on here. So we've got two fifth-year guards who are both in contention to be WNBA first-round picks in this upcoming draft. I think Sheldon is more highly regarded among the two of them just because she's a better three-point shooter and provides more tangible value off the ball than Charisma does, although Charisma has one of the prettiest mid-range pull-ups you're going to see. It hasn't quite stretched out to three-point range yet, and unfortunately you really just can't play the two guard in the WNBA unless you can make a three-pointer consistently. So I think Charisma, if UCLA goes on a little run here and she has some big games and she shows that she can take big shots in big games, which we kind of saw in the Pac-12 tournament. She hit a couple big threes against USC in that double overtime semifinal loss. This isn't quite like the NBA where a magical tournament run just changes GM's minds, because we do have 5 years of data on Charisma Osborne of not being a great shooter at UCLA.
And it feels like the draft happening so fast after the tournament actually helps executives just focus. Whereas you bring these guys into gyms in the NBA, and it's hold on, everything I thought I knew is actually fully wrong and out the window now. I think this 10-minute workout is the full truth. So, but yes, you're right. Yeah,
so Charisma has, I just think, a really big chance here to show that, hey, I can perform on big stages, and I'm the kind of person you want on your WNBA roster, because people love her mindset, they love her attitude, they love her defense, and she looks like a pro already. She has definitely remade her body even between being a senior and a super senior. Whereas JC, you look at the numbers, and that's a player who I want on my team, right? She shoots 35% on threes. She shoots over 40% on catch and shoot threes. She's averaging 2.5 steals per game. Doesn't ever get tired, but she kind of looks a little skinny. I'm not sure how that body's going to hold up in the pros. And it's just such an interesting comparison between the two of them, because they're both on number 2 seeds, right? They both aren't necessarily expected to make the Final Fours, because there are the UConn, USC, and Ohio State's region, and then everybody else in UCLA's region. But so they're kind of underdogs, and this is their last chance to play for their pro futures. So I do think that we're going to see some, I'm not going to say extra stress on them, but this is a major opportunity for both of them, because they both could have gone pro last year, been first round picks, and they elected to defer, put themselves in a more competitive draft. And I think JC has shown everything she needed to this year, whereas I'm not sure Charisma has shown the improvement that she quite needed to put herself a little bit higher on GM's draft boards. So it'll be interesting to see if any of that changes during the tournament.
More likely to win their bracket between UCLA and Ohio State. To circle back to the first two names we discussed at the top of this whole thing.
I would say Ohio State, just because there's less to get through, which is a weird thing to say because I've actually already picked UCLA in my Final Four, but I'm erasing it and changing it to LSU because I just don't trust it. Yeah.
Okay. That's fair. I like it. Yeah, we have some of these players we're talking about are going to be facing off potentially if chalk, which I guess is the absolute opposite of what you're supposed to count on this time of year in college basketball. But if we do get that chalk, we could get Sheldon and Beckers. We could get UCLA, LSU, and Iowa lurking, and it's going to be fun is, I guess, the best way to summarize where we are. And there's a ton of names that, frankly, we didn't even get to that we could have on a long list. But, Chris, any final thoughts? Any, little wishes for the people to pay attention to or teases for our great content upcoming?
I think we'll
Any
have a lot
thoughts
to say
on
about
Dublin,
this tournament.
Ohio? That's where J.C. Sheldon is from.
It
seems like a suburb of Columbus. Is it even worth calling its own thing?
What I really want to say, I don't want to say in the show. So what I will tell you two is that I will give you my Urban Meyer centric Dublin take when we get off of this, because I don't want to say it. I can't say this publicly because it's just not. It's not very nice.
Okay.
Is what I would say.
Is it basically just a suburb?
Yeah, it's where the Jack Nicklaus golf tournament is. His memorial golf tournament is in Dublin. It's like a nice suburb of Columbus, which is a car hell of highway spinning around it over and over again. Sheldon's really good, I would say. I would like to see her against Beckers, just because the way Ohio State defended Caitlin Clark would be interesting to just see that as Beckers as a point of comparison for us evaluating those two and just seeing what that looks like. And Sheldon feels like someone that if she had a good tournament, not that your guys are I think right in that this comes so fast, but if you told me she had a really good tournament and then Georgia Moore doesn't have quite as good of a tournament and therefore JC Sheldon goes ahead of Georgia Moore in the draft, I'd be yeah, that makes sense. I could believe that. I could talk myself into that being a thing, just in part because she's 5'10", and Georgia Moore is definitely the more she's got the scoring upside and playmaking, but she's 5'6", so that's just a little tough.
If you're big and you can shoot, it's kind of really you're on your way.
It's it.
And Sheldon has it.
Yeah.
All right. We got to all 9, plus a little, some detours, some Dublin takes. That'll wrap us up. Thank you for listening and watching the Just Basketball Show. Hit subscribe or follow wherever you are finding us. We will be back throughout the tournament with some analysis, observations, takes from the games as they go. Of course, the NBA season rattling on as well. Chris will be gone next week. And then we will have an announcement about some evolutions going on with this here program. So that is what's going on in our world. Don't forget to follow us on social media. And we will catch you guys next time. Enjoy the hoops.